As many of you have heard me talk about before, my father was the quintessential IBEW electrician. He was a product of the Great Depression and of World War II and Korea, and a veteran of the U.S. Navy. And he was organized into the IBEW back in the 50s, long before it was fashionable, and received his 50-year pin not long before he passed away and before I moved to D.C. At least in my mind, there was nothing that my father couldn't do. When I was a kid, he even built me a gym in the corner of our oversized garage in West Los Angeles. He built a weight rack that held some dumbbells, and he put up a speed bag that a fighter would use. And like any product of the Great Depression that never bought anything that he thought he could build cheaper, he made me an Olympic-sized weight bench out of one-inch galvanized conduit. When the world ends, that weight bench will still be intact. I remember one afternoon, I was in the garage working out, and he was at his workbench puttering away like he liked to do, had his back to me. And he did not have much of an appetite as a product of the Depression and the Second World War for any of my belly aching. But I must have had amnesia that day, because much like I did with Grabelski, I started to unload. I just started talking about everything that was wrong in my high school life. I recall talking about my stupid algebra teacher that just didn't understand me. I talked about my idiotic varsity football coach that just didn't have a full appreciation for my budding NFL talent. I talked about some of my stupid friends. And I even talked about some, probably high school girls that just didn't seem to have an overall appreciation for my wonderfulness. I went on for a while, crying about everything in the world that was wrong with me. But when I finished, and the cool thing was my dad actually seemed to be listening. He didn't stop me for a change. He was even sort of nodding his head. He had the back to me the entire time almost. He even asked me a couple follow-up questions about what I was saying. It really did seem like he was picking up what I was putting down. But when I was done with that tirade, he didn't say anything. Silence. I just poured my heart out to the man. And he didn't say anything. And I got sort of disgusted and irritated. I was like, "Dad, did you hear me? I just poured my heart out to you about all these problems." He said, "Yeah, I heard you. Sounds like you're having a rough time." "That's it? That's all you got?" I said. "Yep." He said, "That's it." But then after pausing, he said, "Unless, of course, you want to know the problem." I'm like, "Oh, really? You think you know the problem with all of that stuff?" He said, "No. I don't think I know. I know I know." I said, "Oh, really? Well, then why don't you just enlighten me?" He said, "Are you sure you want to know?" I said, "Of course I want to know," knowing full well there was no way he could know what the problem was with all those things. Then my father turned around and looked at me for the first time. He had had his back to me, as I said, and he turned around and he slowly walked towards me. He took his hand and he stuck his finger just sort of inside the cuff of this cut-off sweatshirt that I used to wear because I thought they made me look buffed. And he just started to tug. And he said, "Come here." And he started guiding me over to where that gym area was, right in front of that speed bag. And he just stood there with his arm around me. And behind that speed bag was a floor-to-ceiling mirror. And we just stood there a while. And then he pointed. He said, "You look in there for a while. Just stand here. You'll find out the problem." He said, "And here's the really cool thing. If you stay here long enough, you'll find out most of the solutions too." Brothers and sisters, when I look back at many of the decisions I have made in my life, good and bad, I am amazed by the number of times I have had complete control of the wheel all the way along.